Hello and welcome to this video. In this video we're going to be looking at how to correctly shade the Ultra HD irises in Maya Arnold. Now this workflow involves converting your geo into a volume. The reason we convert our geo into a volume gives us greater control over the shading process in a non-destructive way. So we can control the density of any point of the iris, we can control the colour of the iris, and this is probably the most flexible workflow that we've ever created. So let's get started. First, start off by importing your high bottom geo. Once your high bottom geo has been imported, you have to import the high top geo. This always takes a bit of time because of the size of the two geos. But once you've got them imported, you're ready to go. So here's what my two geos look like combined together. My top geo and my bottom geo. Now what I do advise is to go onto our website and go download the base shader that we've created. These shaders come in blue, brown and green. So I'm going to import one of these shaders. For this tutorial I'm going to be using the brown shader. Once you've imported it, you'll realise that there's a camera inside of the group which is called brown projection, or the colour that you picked. The reason that we have a projection camera, we cannot assign a texture to a volume, so we must project using a camera our textures onto it. I'm going to assign an existing shader that's called brown top volume, and I'm going to assign another shader on the bottom one called bottom volume. Once I've done this, I'm going to open up my hypershade and show my shader. Now sometimes in the hypershade it kind of glitches out like this, but otherwise you can just use the node editor, which is probably a lot easier since it doesn't detach the nodes from one another like so. So how does this shader work? What we use are ID maps that we created especially for the irises. I'm going to show you them now. There's a Fresnel map, there's the ID1, the ID2, the ID3, the ID4, the ID5, the ID6, and there's also an ambient occlusion map. These utility maps are for shading procedurally. Because they are all multi-channel based, you can use the R, the G and the B masks in each one of these utility maps to shade your iris. This is the base of what you can do. I'm just going to replace the path of my IDs with the correct ones. And now I'm going to do the same on the top shader. Once you've done this, you now need to link your projection camera to your projections. Let's start off with the bottom. Make sure your camera is linked to the projection camera. In all instances. I'm going to do the same with the top. Now I'm going to look through my projection camera. If the camera seems to be out of place, unlock all of the transform attributes, reset it to 0, and make sure you are looking at your iris. What you need to do is look through your camera and make sure it lines up perfectly on either side of your iris, like so. Your projection camera is now ready to go. So if I go back into perspective and I start up my Arnold render view, I'm going to add a light, directional light. Make sure I add a bit of exposure. I'm going to now press render. Right, nothing comes up. This is because we've still not converted our geos into a volume. Start by clicking on the top one. Scroll down in the Arnold properties, go into volume attributes and set the step size to 10 and the volume padding to 0.1, like so. This converts your geo into a volume. Now I'm going to do the same on the bottom layer. Now both of our layers have been transformed into a volume. In my render settings, I'm going to go into Arnold Renderer, make sure my ray depth has some volume samples, boost that up to 3, and to open up my Arnold render view again and click play. As we can see, we have a volume that's been created. The render has started. And now I can get to tweaking my values. So, how do we shade an iris? Using the ID maps that have been channeled and then regraded, we put them as masks into layered textures. For example, this is the top density and this is the top color. We can make sure these layers are not visible and do one at once to see what they do. As you can see, this is a very non-destructive workflow and you can tweak your colours until you are happy. For example, the density is controlled by white values, and I can lower the density of different areas to reveal the underside and the lower layer of the iris. We can also remap these values to tweak them as much as we want and to find the perfect iris. Now of course, I've opened the brown shader and there is a green shader and there is a blue shader, but they are basically all the same shaders, just with different options. Thanks to all of the IDs that we have created, depending on what colour of iris you want, you can change the density, you can change the colour of any area in the iris. If I zoom in, and I want to reveal the lower layer of the iris, I can. If I click on my brown density outer top, all I need to do is bring down the colour and the strands below start to appear. This is the reason we decided to create two layers for the irises, so you could have complete control over the fibres as well as the top of the iris. If you wanted to show underneath or if you wanted to keep the top, it's up to you. That's why we've done it this way, because the artist has the control over what he wants. We use channel nodes inside of Maya to isolate the alpha, the green channels, the red channels of each ID. Effectively, inside of your utility folder, you have up to around 15 different masks to shade your iris. We also added high frequency and low frequency noises onto the iris to create a displacement which roughens up the edge and makes it look a lot more realistic. The density layered texture, which we've remapped and then projected, is plugged into the density of the volume shader. The layered texture of the colour that is then projected and then remapped is plugged into the scatter colour, and the high frequency and low frequency noises that we've combined together are plugged into the displacement. As you can see, the shader is a non-destructive way of shading an iris with your preferred texturing software. Because of this, you have real-time results on what you're looking at and full control over the shader. All you need to do now is pop in your high bottom geomesh and high top geomesh into the folder where your projection camera is. Place the pivot onto the iris itself. This way, you can place your iris wherever you want and the projection camera will follow it, giving you a render that's always the same with no shift to the colours or density. I hope this video was helpful and that you're going to be able to get started shading irises correctly with volume and full procedural workflow. Thank you for watching this video and see you in the next one.